Best Available Podcast, episode 32. And once again, we're going to change it up a little bit. Not only are we not doing this on a Sunday or a Monday, we're doing this on a Tuesday. So this is new uncharted territory for us, and we hope that you guys enjoy it. It'll be the same Best Available Podcast experience you've come to know and love, just on a different day. So hopefully you enjoy. I am Ryan alongside Matt. I do need to get this out of the way. I got 2 vaccines today at the doctor's office. I went for my first physical in about 7 years, and so I got 2 vaccines that I needed, and I can already feel my left arm, especially. I can kind of feel the soreness. So this is kind of like my Michael Jordan flu game. I'm gonna just battle through this, and hopefully I don't die on the podcast while we're recording this. But I mean, if I do, that'll still be good content anyway. So we'll see. Matt, we're getting into one of the best times of the year, not only just in terms of sports, but also the weather today was gorgeous outside. It's going to be gorgeous for the rest of the week. There's a lot of positivity that we referred to in the last episode, a lot of reasons to be optimistic. So how are you feeling here in March?
Well, Ryan, first of all, today must have been like a good preseason warm-up for the COVID-19 vaccine that we will eventually get, warming up the arm a little bit. Did you get them both in the same arm, Ryan? Or did
No.
you
So
have them switch it up?
I got a tetanus booster, which apparently you're supposed to get every 10 years. The last one I got was, my doctor said, probably when I was 12. And I'm 24 now, so I'm only 2 years over for that one, so that wasn't too bad. That one in my left arm, that's the one I can feel a lot. I can't really lift it up a lot, so call me weak. I don't care. And then I got an HPV vaccine in my right arm, and I was supposed to get that, I think, when I was like 14. That just never happened. So now I've got it. Now I've started the doses. So now I'm getting healthy. I'm getting healthier, and as Matt, you made a great point. Now I'm all prepared. This was good spring training for the COVID vaccine that I'll get. I don't know, but it's a good warm up.
Yeah, we don't know. It could be, next month, could be my birthday in August when we get it. They say the tetanus shot, Ryan, the booster, makes your arm hurt. My dad had to get one. He cut himself on some rusty thing or something, had to get the tetanus booster. He said it hurt in his arm. So that does not make you weak. I've heard that is a common side effect of the tetanus thing. But yeah, I'm good. The weather was great. Went out for a walk. Everyone was out walking, but I had to, the one problem with walking during COVID, Ryan, is if you want to go out in your neighborhood and kind of enjoy the air, you got to zigzag around. If some people are coming the same way you are on the sidewalk, you got to cross the street to the other side. But then 2 minutes later, someone's on that side, so you got to zig your way back to the other side, zigzag, zigzag, all up and down the street. It's a hassle, but that's because I choose to go at a popular time at around 5 o'clock when everyone gets off of work. But yeah, the weather's great. Got college basketball on, following a lot of mid-major conferences right now, stuff that you and I are familiar with. So this is the best time of the year for sports.
I'll tell you, I went out, I guess it was at about 1:15, and there were a lot of people out, which was cool. I think neighborhoods in spring, that's like the best time for a neighborhood. You just see everybody out and about. All the garage doors are open. You see people like sanding stuff or using the saw or sweep. Just everybody's out enjoying themselves. It makes you feel better. But yeah, there were a lot of people out then too. I agree though. Like when you walk, I do like to try to stay in residential neighborhoods when I walk, because at least then, you kind of alluded to it, you got options, right? Like if you see somebody coming on the sidewalk towards you, you just go to the other sidewalk or go to the other side of the road and you're fine. But in some instances, you don't have options when you're walking. So yeah, on your sports thing though, I don't, it's the second favorite time of the year for me for sports. It's firmly number 2. But it's enjoyable. It was enjoyable more so in the past when you could actually get together with people and watch games and do that. But still, it's still fun. It makes things seem normal again, for even if it's just a little bit.
Well, we would have been on our way to Atlantic City if everything was normal, probably with the boys, have a nice little weekend or week, the MAC tournament. We're going to have to wait another year for that. We were originally planning a meetup last year, which was right when COVID happened. Credit to the MAC. They were going strong for a while there. I thought they were going to finish that tournament despite everyone else shutting down, but we missed out last year. This year we can't go. So Atlantic City with the boys is going to have to be next year at the MAC tournament. So it does feel like we're getting back to normal. I've heard it on multiple different radio shows, podcasts, TV shows. When you hear the CBS March Madness theme song, like, you made it, right? Like, we're here. We're into the good part, like, of the sports season. We're going to have the NBA and NHL playoffs, Major League Baseball, NFL draft, NFL free agency. So, yeah, we made it through the awful month of February.
Well, you hear the college basketball music, you hear the baseball intros that lead into the game, you hear the Masters theme song. It just all kind of meshes together. It's a good time for music specifically. Great time for sports intro music. And then, of course, in about a month, we'll hear One Shining Moment, which we didn't get last year. That was a big sadness for a lot of people. We come to expect that, and we didn't get it last year, but it's coming back this year, which is exciting.
It's going to be an emotional One Shining Moment this year, going 2 years. Everyone, I know there's one person in particular, actually multiple people that you and I are familiar with that are a little bit older than us that hate One Shining Moment. It's great. I don't want to hear any of it. The day after, when we were in college, the day after the final, I would always sit before class, obviously, watching the video over and over again, reliving the tournament. And I think we're going to get a good one this year. I hope so. I mean, anything, listen, I'll take a boring, unexciting tournament because we didn't get any last year. So I'll take whatever I could get.
I watch those videos just at random times throughout the year. It makes me feel good. It's like, okay, well, this it brings back a lot of memories. So I'm glad that we're finally going to get another one this year. But before we get to the One Shining Moment video for 2021, before we get to the tournament, before we get to Selection Sunday, we got to get through these conference tournaments. Now, we talked about 6 a week ago, and for the most part, we were correct. So there's already been some auto bids for the NCAA tournament. In the Atlantic Sun, it was Liberty, Big South, Winthrop. Missouri Valley Conference was Loyola Chicago. Ohio Valley was Morehead State. Nick Halper's, we have to say this every time, Nick Halper's favorite conference, the SoCon, was UNCG. And then in the Sun Belt, it was Appalachian State. So before we move into the results that have actually happened tonight for some of the games, and before we get into the rest of the conference tournaments, Matt, there were some teams that we expected to win their conference tournaments that we just talked about, but there were some surprises too. So what were some of your takeaways from the conferences that we talked about a week ago?
Well, I think I texted you Saturday. There was an avalanche of 1 seeds and, top 2 seeds that were going down left and right. We're going to see a lot of not so much favorites, but some of the lesser names this year, at least early on. That's the trend we're seeing. You mentioned Morehead State. I know I've been kind of pounding my fist on the table this whole season about Belmont. Sorry. Belmont, a team that I've been high on for a while. They didn't really look good against Jacksonville State last week. So when I got home and saw that score, it didn't really shock me too much that Morehead State beat them. Appalachian State, another team that upset a 1 seed, looked really good last night against Georgia State. Listen, there were some surprises that we just talked about, but the Arch Madness turned out to be a pretty solid game. I think both those teams should go to the tournament. If Drake does not make the NCAA tournament, Ryan, it's going to be almost as bad as when Monmouth got left out. I think Drake's that good. And I also think some of the other teams on the bubble are just not that good. So, we're starting to approach an underrated 4-day stretch. So from Thursday to Sunday, really Thursday to Saturday, when you got basketball on all day from all kinds of different conferences. So like the quarterfinal rounds of the ACC, the Big East, like all the power conferences. Underrated stretch we're coming up on right now.
Well, Matt, it's not going to be underrated for much longer because this Sunday at 7 p.m., you'll be able to catch your favorite Best Available Podcast co-hosts on twitch.tv/Best Available Player. We'll be doing a full Selection Sunday stream, the first ever Best Available Player stream on Twitch. We'll be going through what happened during Selection Sunday. We'll be going through each region of the bracket. We'll be giving breakdowns. We'll be giving teams to look out for when you're filling out your bracket, because we get to do that again this year, which is fun. And we'll be taking viewer questions. If you have any questions, any at all, they don't even have to be about college basketball. They could be about anything you could think of.
It could be about how the tetanus shot is doing in Ryan's left arm.
Be sure to ask me about that on Sunday. That way I know you care about me. So that's Sunday, as I said, 7 p.m. We'll probably go live a little after 7 p.m., but not too far after. We'll let people kind of get onto the channel, get everybody loaded in, and then we'll start. So we're looking forward to that. It should be a lot of fun. So be sure to join us for that. We talked about one seeds getting upset. Well, you did. You alluded to it. It makes sense to talk about the I was going to go in alphabetical order with these, but we're going to skip around just for a second. The CAA, that tournament ended today. You want to talk about one seeds getting upended? Well, one of the teams in the championship game, Elon, upended James Madison, which was a very big surprise. That happened on Sunday. So they met Drexel in the championship game. Drexel knocked off Northeastern, who was the 2 seed. Two teams that finished under 500 made it to the championship game, and ultimately, Matt, it'll be Drexel going dancing for the first time since 1996. So, as Philadelphia boys, we love to see that. But this was another tournament where the teams that you would have expected to make their runs, they didn't.
Yeah, JMU was dealing with some injury problems. So they were a team going into the Colonial tournament that everyone kind of had a question mark about. Northeastern, I was kind of surprised they lost yesterday. But listen, I mean, Drexel, a team that I was pretty high on at the beginning of the year, they have some really good players. I'm a big fan of Cam Winter. He can score the ball in a lot of different ways. Zach Spiker's really good head coach. Used to be at Army. He came through a couple times when we were at Monmouth with a couple different teams. So he's a really good coach, and I'm happy they're kind of taking that step as a program. Hofstra had some players I thought they could have competed, but Drexel will be a fun team to watch. Do I think that they are going to really do much? Probably not. But this is definitely a good next step for Spiker in that program.
Matt, another tournament that ended today, just really minutes ago, technically, was the Horizon League Conference Tournament. And that tournament went about a little more as we would have expected, with the exception of Milwaukee upsetting Wright State. But Cleveland State, who was the 1 seed, did end up winning the conference tournament. They defeated Oakland 80-69. So this was one of the conference tournaments where the 1 seed did do what they were supposed to do, and they earned that auto bid.
Yeah, so I was really surprised that Wright State lost. I thought they were beyond better than most of the teams in this conference. But that just goes to show the other side of March, right? We talk about all the Cinderella stories. Well, how about the teams that have a really good seasons and have one bad night and they don't make the tournament? But Cleveland State is a sneaky team, Ryan. Torrey Patton, a guy who kind of reinvented the way he played in the offseason, comes back, averaging close to a double-double. I really like Cleveland State. They're depending on the matchup, they could be kind of sneaky. But I will say their road to winning the Horizon League was a lot easier than it would have been if Wright State was there to meet them in the final. Because Oakland, they have a good coaching staff and everything, but it's not the same Oakland team that we're used to seeing in the Horizon over the past couple of years. I just think that Wright State would have really shown us just how good these Vikings are.
Now, there's 1.5 other conferences we can talk about their championship games. The one that has already ended officially is the NEC. That was once again another instance where the 1 seed got upset in the semifinals in Wagner, and they were defeated by Mount St. Mary's. So they met up against Bryant tonight, I should say. And Mount St. Mary's used that momentum, and they won a close game against the 2 seed Bryant. Bryant made a run late. They made it very close, but they ultimately were not able to complete the comeback. So, Matt, Mount St. Mary's ends up getting the auto bid in the Northeast Conference. What do you think about that?
They've been pretty steady for a while in the NEC. The big question was, were some of their pieces coming in? A guy we're familiar with, Peter Kiss, coming in from Rutgers. They got another guy coming in from, I believe, Arkansas State. I think his name was Mello Eggleston, I think. They have a bunch of these pieces coming in, mixing with some of their returning guys. They had 3 or 4 starters come back. Was that all going to mesh together? Because they've been pretty steady, right in the middle of the pack, competing for the past couple of years, and takes his next step. And listen, they beat a really good Bryant team. And I just mixed together a lot of it. So all those names I just mentioned were from Bryant. But this point that I'm about to mention, Mount St. Mary's had 4 guys come back to start, going up against a Bryant team with those question marks to kind of restate this point. For Bryant, were these guys going to take them to the next level? They did. They were the number 2 seed. They looked really good. I was really pulling for Bryant. It would have been their first NCAA tournament appearance ever. But Mount St. Mary's, again, some of that experience with the 4 starters coming back, the steadiness in the conference, that boded true compared to Bryant. But I don't think Bryant's done yet, though. I think they're going to be around for a couple of years.
And now there's 2 going on right now, 2 conference championships that are going on. That half conference that I talked about, it's going on, but this is March. You never want to say that something's over, but in the Summit League Championship, Oral Roberts is up 39-18 late in the first half. It would seem that they are going to be on their way to winning that. Of course, it is March. We will wait to see. But Matt, this was another interesting conference tournament where the top 2 seeds once again got knocked off. South Dakota State and South Dakota lost to Oral Roberts and North Dakota State, and that was your championship. So, how shocking was that, in your opinion?
Well, South Dakota State wasn't the same as they've been in the past couple of years. But again, when you lose a guy like Mike Daum, it's going to be tough to replace a guy like him in any kind of respect because he's probably the best player to ever come through that program's history. The Summit League traditionally has been dominated by them, by North Dakota State. I thought South Dakota would have been in the mix this year, but listen, Oral Roberts, a team that had a defense that was awful a couple of years ago, like very bad. They've really kind of turned things around, and I said they could back in November that they could potentially be in the mix, and they're definitely exceeding even the expectations I had for them. So I'm really pulling for them to get in. A really good story to follow there in terms of just a dramatic turnaround in terms of statistics for sure.
And the other tournament that ends tonight is the West Coast tournament, and in a bit of a surprise, probably to most people, the number 1 seed Gonzaga is losing to the 2 seed BYU. Now, BYU is a good team in their own right. If you take a look at the bracket matrix, their average seed is 6.85. So a lot of people have them on the 7 line. Some people have them as high as 5. One person has them as high as 3. So they're clearly a good team, but Matt, is this at all surprising to you that BYU, as we come up to the end of the first half, is up by 11 over Gonzaga?
Well, that number can be erased very quickly by Gonzaga, one of the most efficient and potent offenses in the country. They've fallen behind in some West Coast Conference games this year and have been able to pull it out. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was there. I think BYU, that's a little too much love to get them as high as a 3 seed, but both these teams are going to be in the tournament regardless. These are some of these conference tournament games you could kind of just like punt away and be like, we're going to see them both. It's not really going to affect seeding. I will say, though, if BYU beats Gonzaga, you could start pushing the seeding up a little bit more. You got to wonder what this does to their at-large chances, Ryan, for Gonzaga if they lose. I mean, the mid-major, Ryan, nope, not a fan of that. Gonzaga, they're going to be the number 1 overall seed. They don't really need to win. They could have lost in the first round of the West Coast Conference and still been fine. So,
well, Matt, some would argue that losing here might actually be more beneficial long term because then you enter the tournament with a chip on your shoulder. If you're Gonzaga, a team that hasn't lost all year, some would argue it's bad to be undefeated going into the tournament. So what do you think about that?
No, I think they're still going to come back and win that game. We'll probably still be recording into the second half. BYU's good, though. They've definitely gotten a lot of love in recent weeks. I think I had them as like an 8 or a 9 seed, but if I went to reseed, I'd probably put them closer to 6 or 7 now. Yeah, the West Coast Conference produces some good teams and some good individual talent as well. If you want good, well, I guess you can't watch them now, but Kessler Edwards from Pepperdine probably going to be in the mix for potentially going to the next level. He was a really exciting talent. There's a lot of good teams in the West Coast Conference. You sit there and say, well, Gonzaga just runs through everyone else. Yeah, but everyone else underneath them plays very good competitive games. I know you roasted me one night when we lived together at school because I was watching like Santa Clara and like Loyola Marymount, but it's a good conference. And a lot of people don't have the patience to stay up till like 2 a.m. to watch. So, next year, watch this conference.
Pepperdine, the team that lost to BYU in a close game last night. As we're recording this, it was last night. Matt, which BYU team do you like more? The one that had Jimmer Fredette on it that made a run, or this BYU team?
I think this BYU team has the more talent top to bottom. But the Jimmer team, listen, that was the first time we were really exposed to BYU basketball. That was the first time that program kind of took the leap a little bit. Jimmer put them on the map. But in terms of teams that I think can make it to the second weekend, I'm going to go with this BYU team.
That I think for someone like me, that's more of a casual college basketball fan, that helps put things in perspective a little bit. By the way, the halftime score, BYU 53, Gonzaga 41. I remember that year. I think I picked BYU to make the Final Four, and they didn't. I can tell you that.
It was electric. I mean, there's certain players you could go on the NBA level, you could go on the college level that just take up like 2 to 3. Like it's a Jeremy Lin thing on the NBA side. Just guys that'll take your focus and attention for a month or two and just light it up, and then you'll remember it forever. Like we will always remember the couple weeks of Jeremy Lin, and he produced good moments after that too. A lot of people forget he's still producing good moments. For that the same way, he's dropping like 100 points in China. I know you have his jersey, so we remember moments like that for sure.
Well, before we get into we're going to get into other conference tournaments. Now we can finally go alphabetically. A year ago, we lost basically every single sport. There was no sports on. So for those,
don't relive it. We're not reliving this.
I say that because Matt alluded to this being the best time of the year. And you just look at how these conference schedules always go. Tomorrow, the first game is at 12 p.m. Eastern, and the final game is at 11 p.m. Eastern. So you're looking at over 12 hours of college basketball. It gets even better on Thursday when the first game starts at 11 a.m. and the final game is slated for 11:30 p.m. This is it. So if don't take this for granted. God forbid something like the pandemic ever happens again. We lose all these sports again. Do not take having all these games on every hour during the day. There's a basketball game on for like the next 4 days. So don't take that for granted.
Well, for those who like the first 2 days of the NCAA tournament, which I know is like the most popular day for everybody, we're getting that basically the rest of the week.
Yeah.
I would say more so if you're looking for just a complete replica of the first day, you want to watch probably Thursday and Friday. Those are your 2 days when it's just literally 7 or 8 channels have basketball on all day. So if you basically the rest of the week, but Thursday and Friday, like 8 channels will have 8 tournaments on all day. And then on top of that, if you go on like ESPN Plus, ESPN3, you could have like so many different options.
Take our advice. Just throw it on in the background. You're not going to be upset if you do.
That's what I did at school. Throw it on when you do some work. Throw it on when you're walking to class.
I know you didn't have any games on when you were in class.
No, of course not. No, of course not.
We were there to learn. We definitely never just sat in the back on the laptop and threw a game on the. We never would ever.
We could do both.
Like
I mean.
Whoa.
I mean, I'm just saying, if someone were to do that, I mean, a lot of employers look for people who can multitask, though, and handle multiple things at once, paying attention to a game and to class at the same time. I mean, that's an important skill. Hypothetically, if any of us were to do that, but you and I never did that.
No,
we only had a notebook out and a pen on our desk.
No, yeah,
and we always sat in the front. We were always participating.
My hand was raised the entire. Okay, not that arm. Okay, let's move on. I raised my bad arm. That was not that was not a good arm. Okay. So we're going to go through the rest of these conference tournaments. It's not going to be rapid fire, but some of them we will be able to get through a little quicker depending on the progress, depending on the teams in it. So as I said, alphabetical order. America. Okay, well, I'm good. That's not all right. America East. This isn't in alphabetical order anymore. This is the order on the NCAA website. America East. Matt, the 1 and 2 seeds in this bracket got knocked off to the University of Good Boys. UMBC lost to UMass Lowell 79-77 on Saturday. Vermont lost to Hartford. So we have a championship game with UMass Lowell and Hartford. That'll be Saturday at 11 a.m. So there you go. That's a nice way to start your day. Matt, what do you think about the America East, both how it went and this championship game that we have?
Well, for those who remember this conference, when we were in high school, it was like Stony Brook and Albany. It was more Albany. This is the game that starts off the epic Saturday. It's like 11 a.m. You kick it right off. It's on ESPN2 usually, I think, and you just start off your day of basketball every year. But it's been dominated by Vermont, really, when we were in college. They had the Duncan brothers. There was like 3 or 4 of them, and they just kept replenishing the stash of guys that could just come in and shoot threes, along with Anthony Lamb, who just got a 2-way contract in the NBA, who was lighting it up down in the bubble. So that they kind of dominated for a while. Of course, the Good Boys went in and beat Virginia a couple of years ago, which then prompted Virginia to go win the national championship. Still defending champions, by the way. But I will say this conference, out of a lot of them, this is the one that's going to kind of suffer the most from having their 1 seed and 2 seed get knocked out, because this is like whoever wins this is going to be destined for the first 4 on Thursday for the play-in game. No offense. Shout out Kelly Douglas, Hartford Hawks. They should win. I would think they could beat a UMass Lowell team that I had finish like 8th. They came in 6th. No one really thought UMass Lowell was going to be playing for a chance to go to the NCAA tournament. So give me Hartford. But no offense to either of these 2 programs, but they're destined for that 16 seed battle in the first 4.
Matt, I just realized I'm the idiot. This is actually in alphabetical order. It goes America East and then American Athletic. That is correct. I apologize to the NCAA. It'll never.
I did the same thing when I did the same thing in November. So yeah. But
okay.
coworker of mine went to Hartford, played women's basketball. So we're pulling for Hartford in this one. So
go Hartford. Yeah, go team.
I said that we need to get Monmouth in there and we could have the Battle of the Hawks. That's what we need. But we'll get the Monmouth.
We will get to Monmouth. They are, of course, a little down the way alphabetically at M. We're only at A, but we will get there eventually. American Athletic, the first round. This hasn't even started yet. This starts on March 11th, which is Thursday. So we can actually talk about this a little more than we could talk about the America East. The number 1 seed in this conference, Matt, was Wichita State. The number 2 seed was Houston. I've seen a lot of love for Houston from a lot of different people. So, Matt, in this conference, should I just trust that the 1 seed is going to get the job done, or should I buy into all this love that I see for Houston?
Well, Houston's going to make the tournament regardless. They're a team that's going to get a top 3 seed probably, as long as they don't lose before the championship game. We talked about Kelvin Sampson back in November, talked about, the pace of play, the defense, the talent that they've been able to push to the next level. They had some good runs in the past to the NCAA tournament. Wichita State, I think, will make it as well, even if they don't win the American, the tournament. I think they've done enough. You have a couple teams on the bubble from this conference, Ryan. You got Memphis, you got SMU, who's a little farther down, but if either of them can make a run, they could kind of push themselves to the other side of the bubble to be in. But trust Houston. Kelvin Sampson's a great coach. They got some great players. I wouldn't go against the Cougars just yet.
I'm gonna trust your opinion, and we'll see what happens. Atlantic 10. This is an easy one to do because we're at the championship. It's the number 1 seed, the number 2 seed. Of course, St. Louis. Their loss, unfortunately, might lead to them being left out. We can get into that a little bit. But St. Bonaventure and VCU. Matt, I know you like St. Bonaventure as a team. I know you like VCU as a team, so I'm sure you're excited for this game. What did you think about the Atlantic 10 tournament?
John Rothstein puts it great on Twitter that the A10, along with a lot of other conferences that have a lot of good teams, kind of just eats at itself, right? He says it cannibalizes itself, like they just beat each other up every night, and as a result, you're going to get a lot less tournaments or a lot less teams in the tournament because we look at, the preseason poll, you had Richmond, who had a really solid team, St. Louis, who, as you mentioned, is kind of on the outside looking in. Dayton still had some good players. Duquesne was pretty decent. Davidson, UMass, like all these teams were pretty solid and all could have put together a decent season and hung around, but because you got to play each other all the time, and we see the same thing in the Big Ten. They beat each other up. I love St. Bonaventure. The great thing about the Bonnies, Ryan, is that their roster is all sophomores and juniors. There's not one freshman and not one senior, I believe. So they will be around next year. They'll be around the year after. I mean, Mark Schmidt is a fantastic coach. I'm going to keep shouting out coaches throughout the podcast, but I mean, the Bonnies are going to be around for a while. And then for VCU, you got Bones Highland, who's going to be a prospect for the next level. A lot of athleticism, a team that I wasn't as much high on at the beginning of the year, but one that did kind of put everything together a year sooner than I thought. But both these teams could win a couple games in the tournament. I wouldn't be surprised.
Oh. Well, I'm sure we're going to talk about them depending on the draw that they get on Selection Sunday. So that'll, once again, twitch.tv/bestavailableplayer. Now, here is a big-time bracket, one that just started play today, and that is the ACC. Now, Matt, you never want to count out Duke. They were able to pick up a W today, 86-51, looked pretty good. Don't want to count them out. Miami also defeated Pittsburgh 79-73, and then Notre Dame came back, defeated Wake Forest late, 80-77. So a couple close games, one that wasn't very close. Regardless, this is going to be one that a lot of people look at here as we get closer to Selection Sunday. A lot of solid teams. Virginia, as you said, the defending champions, the number 1 seed in this bracket. So take us through this one.
Yeah, so this isn't the traditional ACC that we knew from our college days. Shout out to Professor Tetro, big North Carolina fan. Me and him used to have long debates about the ACC and how it stacks up against the rest of the conferences, but very, I don't want to say a weak ACC, but it just doesn't have the same appeal that it used to. Listen, Virginia, they've been the favorite from the start. I'm still big on Florida State. You're going to get a lot of these teams that'll get into the tournament, but with the ACC, I'm more looking forward to watching the teams that are on the bubble. Georgia Tech kind of played themselves into the right side of the bubble, so they seem to be comfortably in right now for a lot of bracket experts. You have the ACC Player of the Year too, and Moses Wright. That helps. But teams like Syracuse who are trying to push themselves in, so those will be the squads to watch. Louisville as well. Another team's kind of hovering around the last four in. So Louisville, Syracuse, Georgia Tech. Look more for those teams. Don't even pay attention to Duke unless they somehow win it. I think that's the only way they get in the tournament. So those three that I just named, those will be the ones to follow here because the teams at the top, we know they're going to get in. We know they're going to be a 3 to 5 seed for the most part, the teams at the top. So pay attention to the ones on the bubble.
Don't count out Duke. As a day one Duke basketball fan sitting before you today, don't count out my Blue Devils. We're really going to get into some big brackets now, Matt, and I say that because these all have big in front of them. Big 12, first one. A lot of good teams in here, in my opinion. Matt, so this starts, as you're listening to this podcast, their play starts today on March 10th, so you can catch some of them. You can see Kansas State TCU at 5:30 p.m. Eastern, Iowa State and Oklahoma play at 8:30, and then play picks back up on Thursday. So, Matt, we've talked about Oklahoma on this podcast recently. We've talked about Oklahoma State. We've talked about Kansas. We've talked about West Virginia. Who do you like coming out of the Big 12 this year? Or maybe who do you like to win this conference tournament, I should say?
I mean, any of the top 7 can realistically win it. I think Baylor still is on another level. I think this will be a good way for them to keep getting the legs back under them after having a 3-week pause. Obviously, they had that loss a couple weeks ago to Kansas, but you're going to need some time to get your legs back under you. That loss is completely, under the bridge for me, not even thinking about it. It should be Baylor, but Ryan, this is one of the only conference tournaments, really one of the only scenarios where I could realistically think they have a ranked team in their play-in game tomorrow night in Oklahoma. That's how deep this conference is in terms of ranked teams. Like the Big Ten has more teams, so it's just naturally not going to go down that way. But the fact that you have a ranked team playing on your first night of your conference tournament shows how many teams are good and have a chance to win. Baylor should win this, but again, all 7 of these teams can make it to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. There's a lot of teams that can make a Final Four run. I mean, the Big 12 is right up there with the Big 10 in terms of teams that can win it all. So this and the Big 10 tournament are the 2 must-watch battles this week.
Well, you know what? Let's take a detour. You brought up the Big Ten. Let's talk about the Big Ten. So Michigan, of course, is a title favorite. They've really exceeded a lot of people's expectations this year. You wrote an article at the beginning of the season about Illinois. They're slided in as a 2 seed. Iowa, another good team, 3 seed. Purdue, 4. As you said, there's a lot of good teams here. You have Wisconsin, Ohio State, who was on the 1 line there for a little bit as a 6 seed. Rutgers, Maryland, Michigan State, Indiana, a lot of good teams here. So let's go through the Big Ten basketball tournament here.
Well, this, like the Big 12, we talked about teams that can move their way up in terms of seeding. If you get a couple wins in a Big Ten tournament, that's going to do a lot for your resume. You mentioned all the teams at the top 10, top 20 teams right there. I couldn't tell you who's going to win this tournament. I mean, it could be realistically anyone 1 through 8. because they all beat up on each other. They're all really good teams, and that's no disrespect to Michigan. I know people are very high on Michigan. I'm very high on Illinois, but who the hell knows with this? That's how good and how deep this conference is. And I keep harping on the point, but the teams that are lower down near the bubble can really play themselves in. This conference was even like 11 deep at one point when you factor in teams like Minnesota, Indiana, who kind of faltered off a little bit from the bubble down the stretch. Minnesota, I think, went the whole year without winning the game away from home. So that's how deep this conference is. But if you win a couple games here, you could vault yourself from like a 6 seed to like a 3 seed instantly. So keep an eye out for movement in that regard.
So let's backtrack. This one isn't going to be as entertaining as the Big 12 and the Big 10, but there's still some reason to watch. There's still some intrigue, and it's the Big East. So that, once again, that also starts today, March 10th, as you're listening to this. Now, the big story here, at least in my opinion, of course, Villanova was the 1 seed, but not only have they lost Colin Gillespie, they've also lost their backup, Moore, who is doubtful to play at any point in the Big East tournament. So now they've lost the starter and they've lost the backup. Now, they do still have some guys behind them that have been getting minutes, but those are 2 tough losses to overcome. We'll see if Jay Wright has something up his sleeve. Of course, he's a very good coach. He has a lot of talent there. One that we are familiar with is what's the guy's? It's not Scotty Lewis, is it?
No, it's
who's the other guy?
Brian Antoine.
Brian Antoine, yeah. So they have him. He's been getting time. We'll see if he's able to take advantage of the additional minutes he's going to get. But Matt, you have Creighton as the number 2 seed here in this bracket. Of course, their coach just got into some hot water recently with some comments that he made. You have UConn as the number 3 seed. So let's go through the Big East. As I said, they start Wednesday, March 10th. So how do you kind of see things playing out here?
Yeah, I'm very disappointed with the Greg McDermott news, but that could be another discussion for another show. But in terms of the players on the court, Creighton has some really good opportunities to win this and really kind of solidify themselves and maybe move up a seed or 2. The Big East, you could find a team to kind of steal a bid, right? I mean, Seton Hall is kind of on the bubble. If they go in and make a run and win this conference tournament, Ryan, they're firmly in, obviously, with the auto bid. I think the same thing for Xavier. If you're one of those 2 teams, you really need to take advantage of this opportunity. Villanova, it's going to be really tough, like you said, to replace not only Gillespie, but also Moore. I think they're a totally different team without Gillespie. And listen, I'm a huge James Bouknight fan with UConn. I think UConn is a team to watch here. UConn and Creighton, Battle of the Seas. Huge Bouknight fan. So if you're watching this in terms of just players, watch out for him on the Huskies. And also our guy, Ryan, Ray Salnave, playing tonight when you're listening to this for DePaul.
So I got to say, I did watch a DePaul game the other night. There was a NASCAR race on, and then there was DePaul came on after it on FS1. It was cool to see. That's really, I'm sure you get the same feeling. You see this guy that he broadcasted games for a couple of years, and then you see that he's playing on Fox Sports 1 for a Big East team. That's a cool feeling to just like see someone in that position.
But yeah, I mean, Ray was definitely one of the guys that I was the closest with on the basketball team. You know, I'd see him, I'd stop, talk to him for a little bit. So it's cool. And he's the second consecutive year we've had a former Monmouth player in the Big East. I mean, people forget Nick Rutherford transferred to St. John's, played last year for Mike Anderson, had a pretty solid season. So yeah, it was a really cool move. And I was really happy he went to the Big East because I think he could play there. And, you know, DePaul is just, they have their own kind of struggles as a program, but, you know, it's cool to see him playing at the Big East level. I will say, though, Ryan, the point I will make about the Big East tournament is not the same as when we were in high school. And people, you know, who are older than us will say, oh, it's not the same as when we were in high school. Like all the 80s was the Big East in the 80s. For me, Ryan, it was when it was like 16 teams. You had like South Florida, West Virginia, Rutgers, like all these random collection of teams in there. And we would rush home from school. And I would remember just turning on like a random South Florida versus Rutgers game at the Garden. It was electric. So the days when we were in high school with the older, in my definition as the older Big East, again, people who are like our parents' age has a much different definition of the old Big East. But for me, it was like those big, long days with all those teams. So it's just, it doesn't have the same draw for me anymore, unfortunately.
No, yeah, this is I think that's a good point. This is definitely a different Big East than, um, as you said, it was when we were younger, when people older than us were younger. It's different, I think, is the best way to put it. So I think that's a good distinction to make. Yeah, I agree. It's I guess, yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna
It used to
upset
be the
myself.
marquee tournament.
Yeah, it's I didn't want to upset myself by going far.
Pittsburgh,
Yeah, it was fun, man. At least
Syracuse.
we'll have those memories though. We can always just go on YouTube, look up some highlights. At least we'll always have that. Um, my favorite conference, at least one of my favorite conferences, Big Sky. Um, so they start up today, Wednesday, March 10th. Your 1 seed in this bracket was Southern Utah. Your 2 seed was Eastern Washington. You have Dame Lillard's alma mater in here as well as the 3 seed. So, looking at the Big Sky, Matt, do you think that this is going to be Southern Utah's tournament to lose? Or you think someone can kind of sneak in behind them?
No, I've been big on Eastern Washington since the start of the season. I'm still going to hammer that home until they lose. They have a lot of really good shooters, a lot of depth, a lot of good pace of play, a lot of possessions to maximize their offensive opportunities. They're a team, if they get hot, they could beat a lot of teams. So I'm just going to stick with them until they lose.
I think that's a good thing to do. I respect you for it, not flip flopping. Um, the final big bracket that we have to go through is the Big West. Um, so, Matt, we got some interesting teams in here. What do you think about the Big West this year in 2021?
Yeah, so a lot of people thought it was UC Irvine and then everyone else. And then beginning of the year, I wrote about UC Santa Barbara. There was a lot of other people that were talking about UC Santa Barbara. The Gauchos, deepest team in the Big West by far. A lot of talent, top to bottom. They have been dominant pretty much all year. Really exciting team to watch. A team that I hope gets to the big dance because I would love to see them play at the big stage. I'm gonna take UC Santa Barbara. I mean, I just they're a fun team to watch. I recommend you stay up late or whenever they play. I can't imagine it's any time before 10 p.m. They're a fun team for sure.
We're getting finally off of the B's, and now we are to C. Yeah, we're making progress here. We hope you guys are enjoying this. This is, as Matt said at the beginning, this is a fun time of year. I mean, there's so many conference games going on right now. You can just watch like whenever you want. You turn on your TV, there's a game on, which is really cool. So, Conference USA that started as we're recording this on March 9th. So, Rice defeated Southern Miss 61-52. So that was a game that happened. But in this bracket, you have WKU, you have Louisiana Tech, Old Dominion, UAB. You got some good teams in here. You have some names, and I'm sure some people recognize names like Middle Tennessee, Florida Atlantic. So, what are you thinking about in terms of Conference USA this year?
So there's definitely some big draft prospects in this conference. I mean, Tavion Kinsey from Marshall, that was a name that's been gaining a lot of traction recently. Charles Bassey as well at Western Kentucky, a former five-star talent. I'll say this: if Western Kentucky does not make the NCAA tournament with the roster they currently have now, that would be a big disappointment. I mean, they have a lot of really high recruits for a conference like the Conference USA. Rick Stansbury, I think, is really good head coach. Last couple of years, Bassey was hurt. A couple other pieces were missing, but this should be the year that they make it. And I hope so because they're a really good team. And they could be We talk about the 5-12 game every year as a 12 seed that could make an upset. This would be your team as a 12 seed, Western Kentucky. So I would be very disappointed if they did not win.
Well, we're finally to the conference that we talked about Monmouth earlier. We said we get to them in a little bit. Well, we're there. We're finally at the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference. 3 games so far have happened. Ryder, the 11 seed in this 11-team bracket, upset Canisius 78-76, so they have moved on to the quarterfinals. They will play St. Peter's, who was a 3 seed. Fairfield was able to pull out the win against Manhattan 59-58, so they wanted to make it close. So they'll be playing Monmouth on Wednesday at 7:30. And then Rick Pitino and Iona were able to defeat Quinnipiac. So the quarterfinals are set. Siena did get the 1 seed. Monmouth got the 2 seed. Co-regular season champions by virtue of both of them winning 12 games. It wasn't one or the other. Matt, of course, we have Monmouth connections. We do want to see them be successful. Siena has their luster is kind of going away a little bit. You and me kind of talked about this before we started. So, I hate to say this, it almost seems like if this was ever going to happen, this has to be the year for Monmouth. I mean, they got a favorable draw. They have, you would talk about how Manhattan would be a tough matchup for them. Well, they avoided Manhattan. It almost feels like this has to be it.
Yeah, I mean, let's. I'm going to give credit to St. Peter's though on their side of the bracket. Shaheen Holloway, a really good coach, picking up right where John Dunn left off at St. Peter's. They're a team that can win against anybody on any given night just because of the style that they play, the toughness they have, the size that they have. But you're right. I mean, if you're looking at the teams that we thought were going to give Monmouth a lot of trouble, most of them are on the other side of the bracket. So to at least get to the MAC championship game is definitely an exciting possibility for sure. But I will say though, Ryan, we got to be objective on this podcast. Iona, man, listen, 4 shutdowns over like 100 days being shut down. If you combine everything together, I still think they're one of the best teams in this conference. I mean, Rick Pitino, when he first came in, he went out and got a lot of size. Nelly Jr. Joseph, Osborne Shima. Shima had close to a double-double last night. I guess 2 nights ago, if you're listening to this. No, wait. Last night. There we go. Sorry. They have a lot of really good size. The problem for them is guard play, specifically consistent point guard play. But I've always said, and I'm revising my thesis, Ryan, on the MAC. I've said for years that good guard play wins you championships in this league. But I'm going to combine it, good guard play plus a good big who can grab rebounds, who can kind of space out the court a little bit. One of the forgotten pieces of those successful Monmouth teams, Ryan, in 2015 through 2017 was Chris Brady. I mean, he did a lot for that team. And obviously, you had like Justin Robinson, Jelon Hornbeek, Micah Seaborn, but Chris Brady did a lot for that team. You look at even the Iona squads, right? Tawan Agee a couple years ago when they beat Monmouth to go to the NCAA tournament in 2019. I mean, consistent and solid bigs help win you championships. And I think Iona has that. But if you look at the guard play, the other half of the thesis, Siena has Jalen Pickett, who somehow wasn't a unanimous selection for MAC all-first team, I believe. Don't know how that happened. And then Monmouth has a lot of terrific guards as well. George Pappas, our guy, Deion Hammond. So one of those 3 teams. You know what? No, 4. St. Peter's. Throw them in there too. The MAC, we've always said anyone could win on any given night. But don't be surprised, man. I know we said it in our group chat. Iona, they just need to get hot at the right time, and they'll make it again.
Well, moving from the MAC to the MAC, Toledo is the number 1 seed in the MAC. Of course, we're talking about the MAC. You have Buffalo. Now, someone that picked Buffalo to defeat Arizona 3 years ago. I consider myself a big Buffalo fan. You have Akron. Of course, you have Miami of Ohio. So looking at the MAC, Toledo is obviously a pretty solid team here. Matt, do you think that they can get this auto bid, or do you like one of the other 7 teams to get it?
Well, anything can happen as we've seen some of these 1 seeds go down, but Toledo is another one of those 12 seeds or 13 seeds that could win a game here and there. The MAC has produced some solid teams in recent years. You mentioned that Buffalo team. Those Akron squads were pretty decent back in high school. Ohio had some good years too. But stick with Toledo. I mean, I feel almost nervous now after seeing that first weekend, Ryan, to pick a 1 seed. But Toledo, sure. But I think there's a lot of other good teams in the MAC too that would well represent this conference at the next stage.
We've talked about the MAC, we've talked about the MAC, and now we're going to talk about the MEAC. Coppin State and North Carolina A&T State are your 2 1 seeds in the 16 bracket. You also have Florida A&M, Norfolk State, North Carolina Central, and Morgan State. So, Matt, I know NCANT-ST has been getting a lot of run recently on the brackets that I've seen. Do you like them? You like Coppin State, or do you like one of the other 4 teams?
Cameron Langley, really good player at NCANT. The Aggies have been pretty solid all throughout this season, as you mentioned, are getting a lot of love recently. Shout out to one of my old coworkers, Archie Jones, NCANT alum. So shouting out everyone who's in the mix. I think they're the best team. I mean, going into the season, we were all kind of looking at what Howard was going to do with Makura Maker. They had to shut their season down just because of just COVID shutdowns. There was a lot of hype going into this year around this conference because of Maker, because of a couple other players. NC Central had a lot of COVID shutdowns as well throughout the year. But take the Aggies. Cameron Langley's an exciting player to watch. Or I'm taking the Aggies at least. We're not giving advice on who to take. We're just saying who we would take. NCAA, pretty solid squad for sure. Coppin State, I wrote about them, Ryan. One of the least efficient teams in terms of, I believe, pace of play. There was some in my article that I wrote. I should remember this, but a lot of information has been filtering in and out of my brain. Wrote about them last month in terms of pace of play. So kind of cool to see them get into the mix. They have a couple solid players too.
So, we've talked about the MAC, we've talked about the MAC, we've talked about the MEAC, and now we're going to go Mountain West. You have San Diego State as the 1 seed. They are currently on the 7-8 line for a lot of people, so they're in a pretty good place to make the tournament, but you also have some other intriguing teams that could get that auto bid that don't have as much maybe flexibility. I think Utah State would be an interesting one. They're kind of in that at-large thing right now. You have Colorado State and Boise State. They're also in a lot of people's brackets. They're in more brackets than not. So San Diego State is very good. It probably would not be wise to bet against them, but we've seen 1 seeds get knocked off already. As you've said, do you think anybody in this bracket can knock off San Diego State?
Well, I think some of the teams you just mentioned, a good point you brought up, are going to need to either make the final or win to get that auto bid because the comfortability is not so much there anymore. Boise State was a team that was comfortably in for a while. They took a couple losses to San Diego State late in February. They also lost to Fresno State. And then you look at Colorado State, right? You lose to Nevada, the last day of the regular season. Not a good loss for them. Another team that now kind of on the edge a little bit, needs a little help to sneak into the tournament. You mentioned Utah State. I think it's on the outside looking in my opinion. But any of those 3, you're going to need a strong showing to solidify your stance in the tournament. So San Diego State's definitely going to have a target on their back for sure. If they lose, I still think they get in, but those 3 teams we just talked about, I mean, they really got to show out here. And listen, I like a lot of those teams. I think I've talked about Colorado State on the program before. I mean, the trio of guards that are really good. You talk about Derek Alston at Boise State. So these are talented teams. Neemias Queta at Utah State. So it'll be a fun tournament to watch because there's a lot of urgency from some of these programs.
Well, if you're a Bill Walton fan, this next bracket is the one for you. The Pac-12, him and Dave Pasch are getting the band back together. So look forward to that on your TV soon. Oregon's the 1 seed in this bracket as it is. They're currently on the 7 line on average for most brackets. You have USC as the 2 seed. They're on the 5 line. Colorado is the 3 seed. They are on the 6 line on average. You also have UCLA, Oregon State. So, Matt, Oregon's a pretty solid team. You know, they'll get to the second weekend year in, year out. But how do you see this conference tournament going?
Ryan, you mentioned it. The Ducks do this every year. They're finally at full strength, as John Rothstein tweeted out the other night. He said, and I'm going to roughly quote here, he said, "Why would anyone want to watch an interview with Oprah when you got a big when Oregon's at full strength?" So just shows what his priorities lie at. I wouldn't go that far. I would watch Oprah interview anyone over Oregon at full strength. Shows how far I've come, Ryan, as a person, because I used to be all in, so. But shows how far I've come. But I will say that doesn't mean you sleep on Oregon now. Okay, just because we want to watch an interview on Sunday night as opposed to Oregon doesn't mean we should sleep on Oregon, because that doesn't bode well for any of us. Because as you said, they're on the second weekend every year, and we're just like, how did they get here? It's because Dana Altman is just such a good coach. Even if they don't win this tournament, whatever, they're going to get into the NCAA tournament, and they're going to be a sneaky pick just because they're at full strength. They got a lot of pieces now. Yeah, they're a scary team. It happens every single year. I think if you're looking for other potential sneaky picks, Colorado, McKinley Wright, pretty solid player there. You mentioned USC, obviously Evan Mobley, going to be a top 5 pick probably. He's pretty solid to watch. UCLA, I think they have some solid pieces with Nick Cronin, but again, Oregon it's every year. It'll be an intriguing tournament for sure. I know a lot of people we know don't like Bill Walton. It's an acquired taste to watch him and Pasch for sure. It's an acquired taste.
I just don't know what people expect when you're watching a late night Pac-12 basketball game. They're like, "Oh, I can't watch this guy. Bill Walton's ruining it." What are you expecting at 11:30 at night? Like, what do you really want? Like, come on, he is perfect for 11:30 Pac-12 basketball. Like, I need that. I need that every year. So I'm glad I'm getting it again. How do you feel about Bill Walton?
Well, Ryan, you and I and Zach and Glenn have recently encountered people online that love the MAC, right? Mm-hmm. They just live and breathe the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference. Well, yeah. Bill Walton is on like another level with the Conference of Champions, the Pac-12. He is, if you want someone who just loves an individual conference, it's the Conference of Champions, as he says. So listen, it depends what night you get him. If you get him on the night when he's just really just out there, you just have to kind of roll with it, because it's usually going to be a good matchup too. Because when he's on his game, it's usually like Oregon State and like Utah. But it's an acquired taste. It's not for everyone. It really isn't. I understand why it's a turnoff for some people, but after a while, you get used to it.
Moving from the Bill Walton Conference to the Patriot League. 1 seed got upset by a 9 seed in this bracket. Navy lost to Loyola, Maryland on Saturday. So they have advanced to the semifinals. They're going to be seeing Army. So we could have had an Army-Navy meeting. Of course, that would have been too easy, so we were not gifted that. But instead, in the other semifinal, we have number 2 Colgate. So they've been taking care of business. They won against Boston University, and they will face Bucknell. So Colgate is obviously the favorite at this point, Matt, but do you think any of the 3 teams could maybe make a little noise and maybe get that auto bid?
Well, the Patriot League, they did something really interesting this year for a conference that's very spread out. They split it into 3 regions, and those teams played. They did like the NHL route and played like 5 games against each other. Imagine playing a team 5 times in one year at the college level, and as a result, one of the conference's best teams, Boston U, who just had a lot of talent, a lot of depth. They won the tournament last year. They had to play Colgate 5 times. And as a result, Colgate, the other good team in the conference, beat them. If you want to talk about a team, Ryan, and Colgate, they got a lot of size. Like they can compete with some high majors in terms of size. I mean, I think I don't know if you went and called a game when Monmouth went there, if it was Glenn, but they back then they had a ton of big guys. Now they have a ton of big guys. They are pretty solid. I'll roll with Colgate here. Just they've been consistent for the past couple of years in the Patriot League. But imagine that, Ryan, 5 times in one year playing the same team. So they did a very unique approach to scheduling this year. And as a result, you're going to get some lower seeds in the later rounds because of that.
So we're going to move on to a bracket that has probably a little more notoriety than the Patriot League, and that is the SEC. And so the first game, there's one first round game technically, and that is March 10th, so Wednesday. So today you'll see Texas A&M and Vanderbilt, and then we move on to the second round. We got some interesting matchups here. So you got Kentucky as an 8 seed, which is not normally where we would see them. They get to play Mississippi State. You have Florida. They're going to play the winner of that first round game. You have Missouri and Georgia. You have Ole Miss and South Carolina. This is going to be a big tournament for Mississippi because they're kind of in that at-large right now. They're only in 19 brackets right now as it stands, so they're going to probably need to make some noise if they want to kind of get their way in. You have Alabama as a 1 seed. We've talked about them a lot. You have Arkansas, LSU, Tennessee, the rest of the top 4. So how do you see this going for the SEC this year? I mean, you have Florida and LSU right now. They're on the 8 line. Missouri's on the 7 line. Tennessee's on the 6 line. I mean, they're fine, but for some of these other teams, this is it for them. They need to make some noise now.
Yeah, you bring up the point about Ole Miss. They're not on my bracket. I had them on the bubble, but on the other side, they would need, in my opinion, to get to the semifinals at least for me to really kind of fall in love with them and put them in the tournament. You mentioned Brian Antoine, Scotty Lewis, the Randy guy. He's at Florida, so another local connection there for us. He's been playing pretty well. There's a lot of teams in the SEC that can win a game and then maybe give a higher seed some trouble in the second round, right? You mentioned like the 7 seeds or the 8 seeds, like the LSUs, the Floridas. Tennessee was going to be a little higher seed, but some teams that could win a game or two here and there. But you mentioned Alabama at the top, Arkansas, another team that I think could win a couple games. I mean, Eric Musselman, a lot of people kind of criticize the way he builds a roster, and he did a great interview last week on another show, going into how he builds these rosters with transfers and everything, and it's fascinating what he's able to do, right? We remember in college when he was at Nevada, did the same thing there with the Martin twins. He's doing it at Arkansas, Alabama and Arkansas. Easy to remember, both A's. Those will be the top 2 teams to watch in this tournament, in my opinion.
So, yeah, I'm excited to see how this one transpires. As I said, the first round starts today, but you'll see a lot more games tomorrow on March 11th. Moving on to the Southland. This is an interestingly designed bracket in which the 1 seed and the 2 seed both get essentially triple byes until the semifinals. So you have Nichols, you have Abilene Christian. Those are your top 2 seeds. You also have Sam Houston and Northwestern. That started play actually today. So in the 8-9, you had Southeastern Louisiana and Ed McNeese, and Southeastern Louisiana won 71-68, so that was a close game. And then you also had UIW and Houston Baptist, and that is going on as we speak. That's a close game, 52-51 in favor of Houston Baptist. But what are you thinking for the Southland this year, Matt?
Well, Ryan, this is I know I just talked about a couple minutes ago how I've come so far as a person to not watch college basketball in favor of other things. But I do enjoy the Southland from time to time. Appalachian Christian is a really good team, like a very good team. They're very efficient, close to the basket. They got a lot of guys that shoot over 50% the past couple of years there. They were one of the hotter teams, not only in the conference, but really in the country last year before the COVID shutdown. They kind of carried the momentum over. I'm going to go with Appalachian Christian here. But, there's been some decent teams to come out of this conference in past years. Obviously, we'll remember most from high school, Stephen F. Austin, right? The Brad Underwood teams there that I think upset West Virginia or someone else. So this is the conference that they came from. So they've put some teams in there that could win a game here and there.
We are closing down. We only have a couple more conferences left. The next one on our list is the Swac, the Cricket Wireless Swac Men's Basketball Tournament. Prairie View A&M is the 1 seed. You have Jackson State as the 2 seed. Matt, is it probably going to be one of them, or do you think a team like Texas Southern or Grambling State or any of these other 6 teams could maybe knock one of them off?
Well, I like both those teams, Grambling and Texas Southern, but Prairie View A&M, a team that, listen, we're shouting out coaches. Byron Smith, really good head coach there, building off of a pretty solid campaign last year. I'll go with them, but there's some teams that could go in and steal a bid, as you mentioned, Grambling, Texas Southern. Yeah, it's another conference that I enjoy watching from time to time. Texas Southern is, in terms of trying to connect this to stories that people might know. Texas Southern is the team that schedules almost all high majors in their non-conference schedule, and will go into conference play like 0-16, and then make the NCAA tournament with a losing record. But that's because they played like 16 games against like ranked teams. So that is the connection that people might know from this conference.
Well, we have made it one final conference. It's not the SWAC, it's the WAC. And we have California Baptist as the 1 seed. They have the only bye into the semifinals. Everyone else has to play. You got Utah Valley playing Chicago State. That's the 2-7 matchup. Your 3-6 is Grand Canyon and Rio Grande Valley. And then your 4-5 is New Mexico State and Seattle. Now, Matt, a lot of people are going to know this because of New Mexico State, and they are the team that everyone picks every year to knock off the 5 seed in the NCAA tournament, and then they don't. So is this California Baptist's year? Once again, I'm not calling out New Mexico State because, I definitely don't do that every single year they're in the bracket, but do you like Cal Baptist? I know Grand Canyon's a solid team. Utah Valley, obviously the 2 seed. So what do you think here for the WAC this year?
Well, we have a former Aggie on our team, Ryan. So we can't fully call out New Mexico State just yet. But you're right. Every year there's like, oh, well, New Mexico State's the 13 seed. They could upset Texas or somebody, and then it never happens. You're right. I love Grand Canyon this year. I know you mentioned some other teams there. Cal Baptist, really solid team, a lot of talent there, but Bryce Drew and Grand Canyon. They're not going to wow you on every given night. We talked about the atmosphere, I think, off the air, Ryan, there. That's a place that you got to go post-COVID, Grand Canyon. It's insane there. But I'm going to go with them initially. But again, Cal Baptist is a team that could win this conference as well. New Mexico State, this has been their conference for the longest time. So now that it's more open for the first time in what seems like forever, there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to try and go for that opening for sure.
Well, some updates, not that you, the listeners, would need to know this because you already know the final result. Gonzaga has now jumped out to a 1-point lead with about 7 minutes to go in the second half. So as Matt said, they will come back, and they did. So congratulations. North Dakota State has actually made it a game with 6 minutes left. They're only down by 10 now, so we'll see if they can complete the comeback or if Oral Roberts is going to win that conference tournament. Might still be recording. It depends how long these take. We're going to talk about, congratulations, we made it through. Find me the podcast that gets through all these college basketball conference tournaments in an hour and 14 minutes. I mean, technically we kind of cheated. We talked about 6 last week, but still. Find me the podcast that does that. I'm sure there's some out there, but we're the best. Moving on to golf. A sport that we don't talk about a lot, but I think we'll talk about more coming up, especially with the Masters next month. I have a golfer that I want to talk about in reference to this tournament. I know, Matt, you have a golfer that you want to get some thoughts out there about. Bryson DeChambeau won. He shot a 1 under in the 4th round, and he finished with an 11 under. Lee Westwood finished 1 shot behind, 1 stroke behind, but he shot a 1 over. Jordan Spieth was in contention, but he shot 3 over, so he finished 5 back at 6 under. So it was nice to see him in contention, though. That's promising. Hopefully he can continue to just play good golf and then just show up when he needs to, because the sport is better when he is better. Matt, I'll let you go first. I know you got a bone to pick with DeChambeau. You're not a big Bryson guy, so I know you weren't happy when you saw him with the victory.
Yeah, so listen, I mean, it's cool what he's been able to do the past year. One of the more electric players in golf, sure, whatever. I just want to remind people this is also the same guy that complained about an ant colony on the golf course and said that it was an unplayable surface last year in Memphis. Just want everyone to know that. I'm not the biggest fan of him, but he does, if you want in terms of just exciting shots, he just goes up there and rips it, right? A couple of those drives off the tee, just absolutely obliterated a golf ball. Something that we always kind of see the more finesse players in golf, but he kind of just goes up there and is like, hit it, like rip it kind of guy and just see how far it goes. So for us, that kind of converted from baseball players to trying golf, Ryan, right? We both tried baseball first and then picked up a golf club. We have that same mentality, just hit it as far as we possibly can. This is what this guy does. But I'm not a big DeChambeau guy, but good for him, sure.
I think he's kind of good in that he represents, like, you kind of alluded to it. He represents the everyman, right? Like, he is what most people would be like if they walked out onto a golf course. As you said, just grip it and rip it. That's not to say he can't do anything else. Obviously, he's very talented. He can play the short game. He can putt. I get that. But for a lot, he's, as you said, he's gotten into some, I think controversy is probably a strong word, but he's gotten some media attention for what he's done while he's playing golf. Of course, I remember, I can't remember if it was last year or 2019. They meshed together where he had the issue with like the cameraman or something, and then he got it, that was a thing that people probably didn't like too much. He acts as I think most people would if they were just allowed to play on the PGA Tour, just average people. So I think you need a guy like this on the PGA Tour. You need a guy that will get attention, not necessarily just for his skills, but stuff he does otherwise. I can see, though, why you're certainly not alone. I can see why certain people don't find him very charming.
Yeah, so I think that was last year, like one of the first events when they came back. DeChambeau came back like ripped from quarantine, right? And then I guess the cameraman was, I don't know if he told him to back up or be quiet, or I don't really know how a cameraman could be any more quiet than they already are. But sure. Yeah, I think it's good for golf to have one of those players, but I also think having too many of them is not great. But he's definitely gets attention for sure.
So the headline of this article, because I looked it up, coincidentally, this was July 4th, if you can believe that. Bryson DeChambeau confronts cameraman for potentially damaging his brand. DeChambeau fired his club angrily into the sand shortly after impact, and he ultimately made bogey. While he described his reaction to the shot as dumb, he took issue with the cameraman subsequently following him closely as he approached the green and marked his ball. And so this is a quote from DeChambeau. He was literally watching me the whole entire way up after getting out of the bunker, walking up next to the green. And I just was like, sir, what is the need to watch me that long? I mean, I understand it's his job to video me, but at the same point, I think we need to start protecting our players out here compared to showing a potential vulnerability and hurting someone's image. So, he was basically upset with the guy doing what the person in his headset was telling him to do, which was to keep focus on DeChambeau. So I think DeChambeau's anger was directed towards the wrong person. But I mean, when something like that comes out, I guess it is easy to see why maybe people don't like you. I'm indifferent, but I can see why people aren't big fans of his.
Yeah, I remember that. I think the quote itself, Ryan, he was literally following me the whole way. It's literally the job description of a camera operator.
Yep.
But when you're struggling, I guess it kind of weighs on you, and you kind of take it out on, I guess, camera people just doing their job. But yeah, that's kind of where he got his start, right? I mean, like immediately post quarantine, comes in ripped and starts like playing really well, and that's kind of when he came onto the scene a little bit more. But I'm happy for Jordan Spieth. I don't want to give Bryson too much airtime on our show. Spieth is kind of hanging around in recent weeks. Maybe he could kind of reclaim his form. Golf's exciting. Zach, I don't care what you say. Golf's a sport. I enjoy it. It's great to just put it on and relax. To just like on like a Thursday or Friday when you get off of work, just put it on and just like don't think. And you just watch like sunny skies and quiet, just the sound of a golf ball. It's great. It's electric, in my opinion. Does this mean we're getting old, Ryan, that we're maturing, that we appreciate golf? Is this because I know a lot of it has an older audience usually, but I'm finding myself watching it every week now.
Well, the audience started to trend younger, Matt, because of guys like Rickie Fowler, and he's the guy that I actually wanted to talk about. So I don't know if you had seen the clip of the guy. So you know how you have the guy that like will say coming up to the tee now from wherever, and then say the name. Like they have that guy at the tee box. Well, this guy at the Arnold Palmer Invitational called him Rickie Fowler. So that was not a good omen for his final two rounds. He finished dead last, and now he's in danger of not even being able to participate in the Masters. So it's, of course, they only send slips out to the top 50 and then former champions. And right now, Rickie is not even in the top 50. He has missed the cut 10 out of his last 23 or 24 events, I think. The last time he won an event was early 2019. It's been a real struggle for Rickie. I just wanted to bring this up because this was a guy when we were in high school, and I guess even a little before and a little after that. Like this, he wasn't winning a lot, but he was always kind of in contention, or he was just putting together good performances. It was easy to see why people are fans of his, but now he has struggled like a lot. Like, and I know Nick Faldo kind of said, he had the viral tweet that said, good news is if he misses the Masters, he can shoot another 6 commercials that week. I don't think that was necessary. I don't think that's the reason why Rickie's not doing well, is shooting commercials, but it's a shame because this was a guy that probably got a lot of young kids into golf, and to see him struggling like this, it just goes to show. It's the same thing that happened with McIlroy, same thing that happened with Spieth, same thing that happens to so many of these guys. Golf is a crazy sport when it comes to the mental side of it. And you can tell that he's just not where he needs to be.
Yeah, Ryan, I know you're a huge Rickie Fowler guy. I know you used to have his neon and for any of the just listening, Ryan made a really long, elaborate point And I'm not going to say what recording software we're on or video conferencing that we're on, but I could not hear him. It was like, and I'm going to do some good audio here. Like I could not understand a word he was saying, but it sounded like a good point. So he gave me the gist of it. So if I repeat anything he says, I'm sorry. Rickie Fowler, yeah, Ryan. He was a guy. He was one of the most notable golfers when we were in high school, right? Just because of the way he dressed, kind of was like the cool guy on the golf course. And I know you're a huge fan of him. As I mentioned, I think you had the neon orange hat or one of his hats. He was definitely good for golf, but a guy who just can't seem to figure it out. And they were talking about him last week, the past couple of weeks, really. I don't think he qualifies for the Masters, right? I don't think he
Not if
qualifies for.
he has a few more weeks to get into the top 50, but I mean that I don't. He's going through some changes right now with the swing. I don't know if that's all it. I mean, I can't imagine the pandemic has made that any easier, but I think he will turn it around. I don't think the guy just forgot how to play the game he's played forever, but he might miss the Masters and the U.S. Open this year. I think that's a very real possibility.
Something that we never would have really thought. But again, a guy who everyone will know in golf. But it's definitely a shame because he got all the head. He was like the cool guy in DeChambeau, except he was actually a cool guy. Like he didn't actually like rage on people for following them too close with the camera or like trying to step on ants. Like, Rickie, he like had the neon orange hat. Like for us in high school, right? To be able to bring high school kids into golf, I think is a testament to any golfer, right? Because people at that age, and even our age, don't really appreciate golf for what it is. Any which way, obviously Tiger Woods did for a whole generation, but for us, with some of these other guys, and Tiger, of course. But I hope he turns it around. He's a guy you always bring up when we talk about golf off the air. So
I don't know. Did you hear, as Matt just alluded to, so now I have to ask, did you hear what I said about the way he was introduced at the tee box the one day?
I didn't. That was also.
Okay.
So I
Well,
didn't hear that part. Yeah.
it's just, I can't get over the fact how we just talked about the guy's one of the most recognizable people in the sport of golf, even despite his struggles. He was introduced as Rickie Fowler. I mean, Fowler is not a difficult name to pronounce. I don't know where we got Flower from, but that should have been I guess that was a bad omen. By the way, Gonzaga is up 84-76 with 22 seconds left, so they're probably going to win. North Dakota State is now only down by 2, so they were down by 20, and now they're only down by 2 with a minute left. And so by the time we finish talking about, I wanted to talk about Dak Prescott, but we've talked about him a lot in terms of what we think about him, where he is among the quarterbacks in the NFL. We both have said that Dallas would be stupid to let him go, and now they didn't. So maybe we'll touch on him in a second. I think it might make more sense to just talk about hockey for a second. That's a sport that we don't talk about a lot, not because we don't like the sport. It's just, there's a number of reasons. I'm not gonna get into a list. Whatever. Don't ask me. There was something that happened to Matt DeLuca's favorite hockey team recently, and it was that a player on the Washington Capitals, who is known for dangerous checks, sent Brandon Carlo to the hospital with another dangerous check that some people in the fan base said was totally clean, no issues. I think even there were some analysts, well-respected hockey analysts, that said it was clean too, which I couldn't wrap my head around. I don't know why Tom Wilson is still allowed to play hockey in the National Hockey League. This is, as I said, this is something that he's done for a while, and so he was only suspended for 7 games, by the way. I feel like to really send a message, they should have suspended him for the entire season, like the rest of the season and the playoffs. You can't let the guy keep getting away with this. Like he knows that there's no repercussions for his actions. Like the amount of money he loses is a drop in the bucket. He just has to sit out a little bit and then he'll be back on the ice. I will say I don't think he means to intentionally hurt people. I just think he doesn't have any control when he's out on the ice because he just goes full speed and he doesn't know how to not do that. But it's unacceptable the way that he plays the game. I don't know why they still let him play games. I hate it. I don't hate a lot of players. I hate him.
I think there's a difference. People will say, "Oh, well, there's always, the rough, dirty players in hockey or in any sport," but like,
Well, that's the thing. He's not an enforcer. He's just a dirty player. Like there's a difference, as you're saying.
well, some of his hits are like almost attempted murder, right? Like, I mean, like it's like I know you said he doesn't do it intentionally. I can't imagine that he wants to send Brendan Carlo or anyone to the hospital, but like, come on, like it's getting to the point where it's like a yearly tradition almost, and it gets to be a safety risk, right? I mean, if you're the league and you want to protect your best players or protect any player really for that matter, and you see someone who's like a clear and present danger on a consistent basis, I mean, there has to be a stat out there in terms of guys that he's forced out of a game, how many games they've missed after that as a result of his hits. I'd love to see if anyone could come up with that stat because I'd imagine it would be pretty high. So it's disappointing. It's disappointing for a lot of reasons. I mean, I love Brandon Carlo as a Bruins fan, and it's frustrating that it happens to your team. It's frustrating that it happens to any team, but especially when it's your team and your player. But it just happens all the time. And it's like the year suspension is never going to happen because at that point, then people are going to say, well, you're taking the aggressiveness out of hockey, but there's a difference. I don't know who said it's clean, but it's clearly not a clean hit. I don't know why people are trying to defend it, but it's, dangerous plays like that happen in hockey all the time. But when it's, every year from the same guy, then it starts to become an issue.
So I found the guy that did it. It was Frank Saravelli. He said, this will be an unpopular tweet, and that's fine because I don't conclude based on reputation or narrative. Right there, you can just tell that the person's just an asshole. My opinion, Tom Wilson's hit on Carlo is not illegal. Carlo's head is not the main point of content. Break it down. Sure looks like he gets chest torso first. Okay, so then he goes into this entire thread. Next step, which rule does Wilson break? It's not charging. So if you don't like the hit and think it's dangerous, you should be out of the game. Well, that's a different conversation. That's a conversation about changing the rule book. If you watch the hit, it's the same thing that he has done his entire career. It's the thing that if you like Capitals fans say, oh, he doesn't do this anymore, he still flies at guys with the stick up. Like you don't need to do that, right? I'm going to go back to what I said. I don't think he intentionally means to kill people, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out, okay, I can check this guy. I don't need to fly at him with my stick up near his head and kill him. Like it blows my mind. I will say Brad Marchand, what he said after the game was nice. I know Marchand himself is not the most well-liked player in the league, but I think everybody agreed with what he had to say after the game. He used some profane language that I will not repeat on this podcast, but yeah, it just seems like this guy is never like gonna face consequences for his actions. I think that's the most upsetting thing.
Yeah, I think from just protecting a player standpoint, I mean, this can happen in the playoffs, right? Imagine nightmare scenario, he takes out Sidney Crosby or one of the league's most notable players. That right there is going to take away revenue. It's going to take away a team's chance to win. It's going to take away, a player's health. So it's a story that just continues that I just, it bothers me. And for the people who don't or casually watch hockey, let's make an analogy, right? Let's say, we have a lot of Yankee fans who listen to this podcast. So let's say someone slides in to second base and tries to take out the leg of Gleyber Torres. Glenn Denegris would be quite mad at that. Well, what if that guy who slid into Gleyber's leg did that to a bunch of other people, right? I mean, at that point, you would be like, get this guy out of the league kind of thing. And it's kind of the same thing.
So this is the fifth time I got this list from NBC. This is the 5th time that he's been suspended. So he got suspended 2 preseason games for a hit on Robert Thomas, the Blues forward. And then this was September 22nd, 2017. Less than 2 weeks later, October 1st, 2017, he got suspended 4 games for boarding Sammy Blais of the Blues. May 1st, 2018, so in the playoffs, he got suspended 3 games for an illegal check to the head of Zach Aston Reese of the Penguins. And then September 20th, 2018, he was initially suspended 20 games for an illegal hit to the head of Oscar Sundqvist of the Blues. I don't know why the Blues are really always the team, but he was able to reduce that suspension to 14 games. And now he has this one, which is 7 games. He had the chance to appeal it. I don't know if he did. At 26 years old, he's been suspended 5 times. That's not even counting all of the other dirty hits that he's had that he didn't get suspended for. Maybe he only got a minor penalty. Maybe he did meet with the Department of Player Safety. I think that's the thing. I think that's the thing that I have the biggest issue with. Like the NHL preaches player safety a lot, and yet you have a former enforcer as the head of the Department of Player Safety. That doesn't sit right with me. It doesn't seem like the smartest thing to do. Like, they're always going to stick up for these guys. They're like, oh, whatever. It hit this, that, whatever. Like, you can't say you care about player health and then have Brendan Shanahan as the head of Department of Player Safety. It doesn't add up. There's no correlation.
Well, yeah, at that point, those people are going to still defend and say, oh, it's part of the game. It's never, you take that out. It's the same people that don't understand that you can play football and hit people, but you don't need to go helmet to helmet, right? It's kind of the same concept to where there's always going to be these people defending it and say it's just part of the game. It's clearly not. At 26, you mentioned the stat. I mean, you got to try to be suspended that much by that age, at that stage of your career, but it's just frustrating, you know.
I say Brendan Shanahan, by the way. Of course, he's no longer the president. Now it's George Peros, another guy who I don't know how. These guys
Shouldn't
have gotten.
The player safety be a doctor? Shouldn't they get like someone who's not a former player? Wouldn't that make sense?
Like this
for
is
someone who
like this. They go from Brendan Shanahan, who was known for racking up the penalty minutes with the stuff that he did, and then you replace him with George Peros, who accumulated 812 penalty minutes in just 6 years with Anaheim, 1,092 overall in 9 years. Like, can't we just get somebody that maybe won the Selkie or the Lady Bing, someone that understands when a hit is dirty, and maybe then we get like some, or as you said, doctor, sure, why not? Just get somebody that didn't hit people during their entire career. I think that would be a good idea. But although now that I'm on Google, it says, how do I make a complaint to the NHL? It says I can live chat or email them at nhltvsupport@nhl.com. So maybe I'll do that. We'll see where that gets me. So we are an hour and 40 minutes into this, basically. Probably a little less because we had that stoppage, but we don't want this to go too long. So I think this is probably a good place to end. As I said, best available player on Twitch on Sunday at 7 p.m. We'll talk about Selection Sunday. We'll talk about a lot of college basketball. By the way, North Dakota State was able to tie it up 72-72, but Oral Roberts pulled out the dub 75-72. So Ryan was correct. Oral Roberts did pull out the victory, as I always thought they would. No doubt. We'll be back next week, and we will preview Major League Baseball. We haven't forgotten about that. So we'll talk about some fun stuff next week. So be sure to stay tuned. But as I said, live stream. That's the important thing. Come out, have some fun. There are going to be some fun people there in the chat, I'm sure. Interact with them, interact with us. It'll be a good time. So do you have anything you would like to say before we end this? One of the longest episodes we've done in quite some time.
Dak Prescott, top 10 quarterback. Congratulations to Cowboys fans. You got a good quarterback. That's all I got.
I agree.
Oh, Trent Brown to the Patriots. Thank you, Zach. Big move for us.
Thank you for listening, and we'll see you guys again this weekend.